Welcome to my talk on standardization versus customization for the indoor ag community. In this presentation, I'm going to give my opinion on how some standardization will help drive our industry forward while helping us compete for a new customer base. Before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Chris Higgins. I'm the General Manager and President of Hort Americas. We are a wholesale supply company specializing in LED grow lights, hydroponic fertilizers, and substrates. I'm also the owner and chief editor of Urban Ag News, an online original content producer providing science-based information for the commercial hydroponic, greenhouse vegetable, and vertical farming community. I'm lucky as I get to also participate as an advisory board member and a board member for a variety of grant initiatives, startups, and nonprofits. Also, before I get started, let me give credit where credit is due. I want to thank Dr. Eric Stein, the Executive Director of the Center of Excellence for Indoor Agriculture, for his help in helping me create this presentation. Next, let's talk about why the topic of standardization versus customization. Easy answer, the team at Zenith asked me to. They read an interview I did with Vertical Farming Daily back in January of 2021. Hopefully we can make this link available to those who want it, but essentially, a more difficult answer is vertical farming is in a nascent stage. We are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in what is still an unproven industry. It's my opinion that if we are to be successful, we need to be critical of all the actions we take and truly understand why we make them. Maybe a more simple answer is that in order for us to be successful, we need to be profitable. In order for us to be successful, we need to find a way to sustain our industry for decades to come. And much of that is going to be based upon how we decide we're going to manage our operations. Standardization versus customization is a basic element in an operations management strategy. For those that might want to know, operations management can be defined as a business practice of creating the highest level of efficiency within an organization. Let's get started by building a foundation for this discussion. First, it's important to note that I feel my area of expertise is between seed and harvesting. For the sake of this discussion, we will focus on examples between seeding and harvesting for an indoor farmer. Second, we need to define a couple of words. First, let's define standardization as producing maximum variety of products from the minimum variety of materials, parts, tools, and processes. Third, let's define customization, which is the process of designing and engineering and producing goods based on a customer's unique set of specifications. Finally, let's not confuse customization with mass customization, which is a process that allows a customer to personalize certain features of a product whilst keeping their cost at or near mass production prices. We need to remember that as indoor farmers, we're ultimately growing fresh produce. We have to always keep in mind what the cost of that fresh produce is going to be that allows us to enter and maintain our market. Here are some easy ones. These are things that we can normally agree upon. First, the benefits of standardization. Standardization helps us to reduce costs and leverage scale. It helps us to improve and manage the design of our facilities. It helps us to speed up and advance our industry as a whole. It helps us facilitate the improved marketing of products by simplifying the procurement process, which ultimately decreases overhead. Let's talk about the benefits of customization. As an industry, we don't want to lose our ability to innovate and be creative. We all can agree that we have a lot of problems that have still yet to be solved. Customization allows us to also create and differentiate us from our competitors. It may increase our profit margins, and it definitely can help us improve the customer and the worker experience. So how does this apply to controlled environment agriculture? And let me stop there and say that, as most of you know, I include vertical farming as part of the controlled environment ag industry, which I also include to be part of the bigger fresh produce horticulture industry. So what we're looking at here is a picture of two different greenhouse tomato production facilities. These are two very different farms. If you look closely, you'll notice one has a glass greenhouse, the other one's a poly greenhouse. You'll notice that one uses supplemental lighting, the other has no supplemental lighting. But you'll also notice that the greenhouses have a lot in common. These commonalities allow each farmer to use materials from a wide variety of suppliers, but also share in the interoperability of the two farms. By that I mean, this sharing allows them to train their current or future employees from one farm to another. This sharing allows for success of certain systems and failures of certain systems to be shared. This also allows for a sharing of resources from those supporting our industry, whether those be consumable suppliers, equipment suppliers, or service suppliers. Each farm has its own ability to be unique. Each farm has its own ability in these photos to create a different offering for their consumers. But each farm also doesn't have to walk that path alone. Each farm can learn from one another and share in the ultimate success that an industry can build. So why am I even concerned with this topic? Why even bring these comments up? Well, first let's talk about balance. For me and my business and my life, everything's about finding balance. I know that all of us are entering in the indoor ag space. We're all entering an industry, like we've already discussed, that's relatively nascent and young. And I also understand that as a new industry, we have a lot of answers we have to solve, but we have to find a way to balance the cost of solving those problems with the value of solving those problems. We have to find a way of balancing the different pulls we have on our individual businesses, whether those are pulls from the customer and the market, pulls from our individual employees, pulls from finding different employees to fill different tasks and different roles, pulls from bankers and investors, pulls from the environment around us, or political pulls. Finding this balance will allow each of us in the indoor ag space to ultimately succeed in an area where the probability of failure is relatively high. We can take a step back and look at my businesses as an example on how to determine when standardization and customization may apply. Earlier this year, Port Americas decided that we were going to invest in a new ERP system. We had some choices to make. Would we use an off-the-shelf product, or would we use a customized product? Before making those decisions, we decided to look at a couple of things. We knew we wanted to improve the functionality of our system. We knew we had to solve some existing technical issues. We knew that we were very different than a lot of the other businesses that the off-the-shelf company product companies were accustomed to working with. And we also, most importantly, from my position, knew we had to stay within a budget. What this ultimately led to us asking a series of what, why, and who questions. We had to make sure that each one of our requests were met by our supplier. And we knew that in making the determination of what we were going with, we knew that we could not increase our end user prices. And we knew that we needed to create a tool that was ultimately for us and not for our customer. For these reasons, we chose a product that was standardized. And then we worked with our supplier to make small custom changes to the ERP system that we ultimately decided to go with. I think many in the indoor ag space have similar challenges that they have to meet on an everyday basis. Again, remember, we're still a nascent industry. Ultimately, we're producing the same crops as a greenhouse grower or a field farmer. And we're trying to solve some very large global problems with a very capital and energy intense process, meaning that our costs are naturally going to be higher than those growing in a greenhouse or an open field. We also know that it's currently very challenging to differentiate the product that we're producing with those produced by other farms and those produced by other farms using other farming technology. On this little image here on the left, you can see how people look at the key nutrients within lettuce. Nowhere here in this diagram that came from the USDA, nowhere here do they define how the product was farmed. All they're looking at is what is contained in the product. And that's what we ultimately have to keep in mind when we're thinking about our customers. Are they really going to ask us, how was the product farmed? So we can all agree that this conversation of standardization versus customization is not an easy conversation to have. We probably have people that are sitting there during this presentation, kind of shaking their head and disagreeing adamantly with some of the points that I'm making. We know what we can, and here are probably some of the points we disagree upon, that vertical farming is a category within the controlled environment ag or larger ag industries. We probably disagree that certain standards and expectations have already been set by those who have come before us. And we probably disagree that those standards are worth keeping. We also, on the customization side, probably feel, there's probably some of us that feel, that the role customization plays in why we are building vertical farms is more important than others. We also probably disagree on the effects and benefits of certain custom concepts and farming processes, with the disagreement lying heavily in why we are customizing those farming processes, and maybe even the fact that they need to be customized in the first place. The impact, we also probably disagree on the impact that customization will have on enhancing the customer experience. On the right here was an article that I saw in Vertical Farming Daily very recently. Bato Plastics is a company that Horde Americas happens to work with. But more importantly, let's look at what's highlighted there. 20 years ago, growers would ask for 20,000 pots. And that, for a company like Bato, meant that they would work on a custom option. Now, companies like Bato's are looking at custom orders meeting a minimum of 200,000 pots. So while the world around us is scaling up at a quick pace, we as an industry still have relatively small needs on an overall basis. So in order for us to find scale, we need to look at standardizing certain products, processes, and systems so that as a group, we can find those scales of economy that let us compete with those other people producing products that are very similar to ours. So I believe we should always be asking ourselves questions. Some of the questions that you might be asking yourself right now is, are we a farm? If so, if we are a farm, how do we define our customer? Others may be asking, are we a tech company? If so, how do we define our customer? When and where can product standards benefit our industry, our companies, and our customers? And ultimately, I feel we have to ask ourselves, what problems are we truly solving? Now, one thing we can all agree to is that history is probably, always right. Eventually, standards will come, and normally they will come in one of two forms. The standards will be set by those that build the best technology, and those standards fit a well-defined system. Or the standards are set by those that are most commercially successful. I thought that I might use lighting as an example, since indoor ag, we're so dependent upon lighting. You can see here that really lighting got its start in the late 1800s. By the early 1900s, standards were being set. And as you can see here, those standards were being set by those who were most commercially successful. So a few other reasons that we should continue to support standardization. And I would argue that these are some of the same reasons you should support your industry. Number one, education. Groups like Optimia and Urban Ag News, our role is to help you answer technical questions. Some forms of standardization will make it easier for us to define, create, and then ultimately answer those questions. We know that the consumer is going to be looking for us to meet certain standards. More than likely, those standards are going to revolve around food safety. So the ability for us to build systems that fit in an already defined category are very important to our success. Others might be, using organics as an example. For those that have been following the hydroponic organic movement, they know that it's been a roller coaster ride. They know that we are constantly trying to fit a program that is already set. And in doing so, we're trying to set standards on the run. This leaves us vulnerable, and this makes it more and more difficult for us to compete on a broader scale. It also makes it difficult for us to explain to the customer what our differences are, because we're not the ones setting the standards. So why is all this important to me? It's important to me because this industry is what I spend most of my life doing. Cultivating, building, and growing the controlled environment industry has become center to all my work. I believe that as an industry, if we pull together, we can bring real value to our families, our communities, and our environment. Thank you very much. And please reach out to me if you have any questions, would like to good discussion or argument. And I look forward to talking to each of you in person soon.